Cousins.
The most dangerous player in the NBA doesn't always wear the other team's jersey. Sometimes he suits up right next to you, sits in the same locker room, boards the same charter, shares the same huddle, and does more damage before tip-off than your opponent does across an entire playoff series.
Carmelo Anthony has been brilliant so far.
This league has given us players who publicly humiliated their teammates in front of the front office, players who threatened to blackmail their own coaches on a team plane, players who walked into a locker room with weapons.
Fair rebound. Edwards out of the blocks, plunging into the paint.
Players who abandoned their team mid-season, mid-finals, mid-drill, because showing up was too inconvenient. 12 players, 12 documented cases, all of them made their teammates into casualties, starting at number 12.
And the Lakers have the lead. Not for long, though. Gilbert Arenas puts some
12, DeMarcus Cousins.
Look at the big man taking inside. What a play!
Here's the part nobody talks about when they talk about DeMarcus Cousins. Through the first half of his career, Boogie Cousins led the entire NBA in two categories that had nothing to do with points or rebounds.
Send it to the line for a three-point play. They love it here in Sacramento.
77 technical fouls, 10 ejections. Both figures were the highest in the league across that entire span, and they came packaged with 6 suspensions, 5 from the league and 1 from his own team. That isn't a hot streak, that's a way of playing. If you were watching closely during those Sacramento years, the pattern was consistent. Cousins would dominate a game, and he genuinely could. A 6'11" big man who could score from anywhere on the floor. Then something would happen. A foul call he didn't like, a referee he couldn't let go of. And the Kings would spend the fourth quarter of a meaningful game without their most important player because Boogie had been escorted off the court again. Stay with me on this. There's a quote from an ESPN feature during his Sacramento days that never gets cited enough. It came from someone around the league describing what it was like to consider trading for him. The summary: for every coach who believed in Cousins, there was another who said he would fight his general manager before letting Cousins into his locker room. That quote exists because coaches who hadn't even coached him had a read on what his presence meant for the other 12 men in the room. 4-time All-Star.
Frustration on that one. Evans another three, and that rims out. And
Selected 5th overall, the kind of talent that comes around maybe once a decade at the center position, and a pattern of leaving his teammates short-handed. Not once, not twice, so often that it stopped being surprising. You can love the game and still cost your teammates whenever you can't control yourself in it.
Oh, look out! He just goes right up and over now. I know
Cousins proved both were possible at the same time, and that's where this list begins. Because the man at number 11 didn't just lose his composure in critical moments. He left his teammates in the middle of the NBA Finals, twice in the same season, and called it being himself.
send it to the line for a three-point play. They love it here in Sacramento.
11, Dennis Rodman.
Isaiah dishing in the lane to Rodman, behind the back dish to Woolridge for the...
During the 1997-98 season, the Bulls' last championship run, the last dance, Phil Jackson did something that made Michael Jordan shake his head in real time. He gave Dennis Rodman a 48-hour pass to go to Las Vegas. Rodman had been on his best behavior all season, a model teammate in the way only Dennis Rodman could be. He came to Jackson and asked for time off to let loose. Jackson said yes. Jordan's exact words to his coach: "Phil, if you let this man go to Vegas, we are definitely not going to see him." He wasn't wrong. The clock ticked. Games were coming. Rodman was nowhere to be found.
Ewing over and rejected by Dennis.
Jordan flew to Las Vegas himself and pulled his teammate out of a hotel room to bring him back to the team. A 6-time All-Star and 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, retrieved from a Vegas hotel by the greatest basketball player who ever lived, because he couldn't manage 48 hours.
Deep in the left corner, and Rodman pulls it down.
Here's where the story gets worse. 3 months later, right in the middle of the 1998 NBA Finals against Utah, Rodman skipped practice and boarded a plane to Michigan to appear on WCW Monday Nitro alongside Hulk Hogan. The Bulls were up 2-1 in the series. Phil Jackson's phone was ringing through Hulk Hogan's hands.
Better than anybody in the league?
Reggie Miller, 21-footer, no.
Scottie Pippen, who never said much publicly about anything, told reporters it was very frustrating and stressed that team chemistry was what they needed most in that moment. Jackson, caught on camera at practice after Rodman returned, said, "We were dishonored." Rodman's answer? He was just being himself. The Bulls won the championship in 6 games. Rodman has 3 rings from that dynasty. So like Jordan's entry higher up this list, the conversation gets complicated by what happened on the court. But the men who had to hold it together while he was gone, they remember what it cost them to keep that ship upright without him. Coming up, a player whose disrespect for his teammates never came with a Vegas trip or a wrestling appearance. He delivered it directly at the podium on Media Day.
Boy, Rodman just soared over Neely. Lambeer pulls it off.
10. Carmelo Anthony.
Anthony knocks down another. He's 5 for 6 already. Anthony red hot.
September 2017. Oklahoma City Thunder Media Day. A reporter asks Carmelo Anthony whether he'd consider coming off the bench to help fit into OKC's star-heavy rotation alongside Russell Westbrook and Paul George. Anthony looked at the reporter, laughed,
Lays it in. 51, a career high.
turned to Paul George, who was standing nearby, and said, "IP, they said I gotta come off the bench," and laughed again. That was day 1. By the time the 2017-18 season ended, Anthony had posted the worst statistical campaign of his career, a 40.4% field goal percentage, the lowest since he entered the league in 2003.
From half court, Carmelo Anthony knocks it down.
A+- of -58 in the playoffs, dead last on the Thunder. The team lost to Utah in the first round. During the final 2 games of that series, Anthony was glued to the bench as his team mounted a comeback he was not a part of. Exit interview, April 2018. "Yeah, I'm not sacrificing no bench role."
Right by Tyler. And Anthony is now tied for the most.
That's out of the question. Here's the part that sits with you. Russell Westbrook was the reigning MVP. Paul George was playing the best basketball of his life. These were 2 of the better players in the league, entering what should have been a legitimate championship window.
Anthony puts up a 3, puts it in. Now he's got 49.
They had invited Carmelo Anthony into that window. He spent the entire year making it clear he wasn't willing to find a spot in it. The Thunder waived him that summer. His next stop, Houston, cut him 10 games in.
He hits again. Anthony. Carmelo Anthony is.
He accepted a bench role years later, in Portland, in Los Angeles, quietly, with no press conference announcements.
Excuse me, 46. I'm getting ahead of myself. Chandler the rebound.
His career wound down the way it had to, in a reduced role he'd publicly sworn he'd never accept. The window he had in Oklahoma City, it closed. Westbrook and George both eventually left. No ring.
Anthony knocks down another. He's 5 for 6 already. Anthony red hot.
What Carmelo told the whole league he wouldn't sacrifice, his starting spot, cost his teammates a run that might have been the best shot any of them had.
37 first-half points. A scintillating.
The man at number 9 didn't just put his ego above his teammates. He told them directly it wasn't worth his time and used a very specific phrase to explain why.
Rattles around and drops in. He's got double figures already.
9. Latrell Sprewell.
But Latrell Sprewell has the hops in those legs as he gets way up there.
The 2003-04 Minnesota Timberwolves were the best team Kevin Garnett had ever played on, and Latrell Sprewell was a massive reason why. Averaging 19.8 points in the playoffs, running the offense alongside Garnett and Sam Cassell, the trio reached the Western Conference Finals, the farthest in franchise history.
6.5 remaining in the fourth quarter.
2 wins away from the NBA Finals. The Lakers beat them in 6 games, but for the first time, Minnesota felt like it had something real. Then the Timberwolves offered Sprewell a 3-year extension worth approximately $21 million. His response, in his exact words, "Why would I want to help them win a title?"
Thank you. Well, it's been tremendously exciting for us. Thanks very much, Jim. All right.
They're not doing anything for me. I've got a lot at risk here. I've got my family to feed. Sit with that first sentence for a moment. Why would I want to help them win a title? Those are his own words about Kevin Garnett, one of the most ferociously driven competitors this sport ever produced. About Sam Cassell, who was 33 years old and playing his best basketball alongside Sprewell and knew his window was running out. About a franchise that had never gotten that far and finally had a real shot at something. Sprewell walked away, rejected every other offer that came.
You got quite an inspiration to all of us. Mark. All right, thank you, Jim. Remarkable man.
His agent publicly declared that the $5 million mid-level exception, what nearly every other team in the league was willing to pay, was a level beneath which Sprewell would not stoop or kneel. He never played another NBA game. The money he walked away from, the teammates he left without their third wheel.
Take care of business like you know how. Now, it should be pointed out as Sprewell.
The window that closed the moment he decided the offer wasn't enough to make their title worth his time. The league is full of players who made bad business decisions. Sprewell is the only one who explained the reasoning out loud, with a quote about not wanting his own teammates to win.
Timed beautifully between Gary Payton and Latrell Sprewell.
What he did with one statement, the man at number 8 did with silence. And the silence cost his team even more.
Take care of business like you know how. Now, it should be pointed out as Sprewell.
8. Ben Simmons.
Covington. If you have not seen this young man play.
June 20th, 2021. Game 7, Eastern Conference Semifinals, Wells Fargo Center, Philadelphia. The Sixers, the top seed in the Eastern Conference, trailing Atlanta by 2 with 3.5 minutes left. Ben Simmons spins off his defender, beats him clean, gets to the baseline under the basket.
Missed that time, and here he is, getting downhill. Nice.
The only thing standing between him and a tie game is Trae Young, 6 feet 1 inch tall, the most undersized defender on the floor. A wide-open path to the rim. Simmons passed. He passed to Matisse Thybulle, who was fouled, missed a free throw, and the Sixers were eliminated 103-96.
By over Richardson. With over 8 again. Just watch it as he comes down in.
Embiid pointed to that moment after the game as the turning point. His partner in the backcourt, the person he'd been told was his co-star, had the ball and a clear path to tie a playoff Game 7, and passed. That was the end of the relationship.
Simmons here. Nice. Great cut and pass for the layup. Remember he told you about.
Simmons demanded a trade that summer, having scored just 19 points in the final 3 games of that series on 3 shot attempts in all the fourth quarters combined. Then he reported to training camp in October, still a Sixer.
Just blew right by. James Johnson couldn't corral that pass from Dragic.
$147 million remaining on his contract, and refused to participate in a practice drill. Doc Rivers told him to leave. The team suspended him 1 game for conduct detrimental to the team.
So they're difficult. Why? Because they stay wide. And remember, both of these teams.
Joel Embiid spoke to reporters that day. He was 27 years old, the center of Philadelphia's championship window, watching his co-star refuse to sub into a drill. At this point, I don't care about that man. He does whatever he wants.
Here he comes. You got 2 on the. There it is. There's your step. Now watch the quick recovery.
His teammate, Danny Green, who had re-signed specifically to play alongside Simmons, called that Game 7 moment the beginning of the end. Simmons was traded to Brooklyn for James Harden in February 2022. He never played for Philadelphia again. The definition of treating your teammate like trash isn't always a shout or a shove.
Simmons with the tip. Little Ben Simmons magic here. As he fakes it.
Sometimes it's $147 million on a contract, a partner at the peak of his prime, and a decision to pass when every person in the building was counting on you to go up. That's number 8.
Inside, Saric got loose. Well, no.
And what's coming next is the story that changed the league's entire relationship to itself. Because the damage wasn't on a basketball court, it was in the locker room.
Year.
7. Rudy Gobert.
Been attacking. And Doncic has got 2, but he is on the floor for LA. Look at the middle.
Here's what the highlight reel leaves out about the night the NBA shut down, March 11, 2020. Rudy Gobert became the first NBA player to test positive for COVID-19. The news filtered into Oklahoma City while the Utah Jazz were warming up to play the Thunder.
Alexander Walker cutting Gobert, and no one was on him. No one was around.
Within hours, the league had suspended its season. The rest of the sports world followed. Everything stopped. But if you were paying attention, the real story in Utah had already started days before that test result came back.
It's DiVincenzo. Gobert is there. The size is unstoppable.
Reports from inside the Jazz organization described Gobert as repeatedly careless with his teammates' personal belongings in the days leading up to his diagnosis, touching equipment and lockers despite direct warnings about how serious the situation was getting.
Edwards, Alexander Walker will penetrate and feed and go.
Then, 2 days before his positive test, he sat down at a media availability in Oklahoma City and jokingly touched every microphone and recorder on the table. His teammates knew he had done it. The entire league saw the footage. Stay with me on this. When Donovan Mitchell tested positive the following day, that footage became something different.
Gobert, 6 of 9, 13 points, already 7.
It became personal. The Athletic reported the relationship between Gobert and Mitchell doesn't appear salvageable. These were two all-stars who'd built Utah into the most consistent threat in the Western Conference over several seasons. They made public amends. Both said the right things, but the trust was gone.
Been attacking, and Doncic has got 2, but he is on the floor for LA.
Look at the middle.
By the summer of 2022, Jazz CEO Danny Ainge had seen enough. Gobert was sent to Minnesota in a trade that brought back 4 first-round picks, a historic price for any center in the history of this league. Mitchell was shipped to Cleveland weeks later. 2 franchise pillars, 1 act of carelessness toward the man who was supposed to be your partner.
How wide open the middle is.
It's too easy. Right over Cleveland. And that's how
This game doesn't ask for much beyond talent and effort, but not putting your teammates' health at risk, that's the lowest bar there is. Gobert couldn't clear it, and what's coming next makes that look like a minor disagreement between friends, because the man at number 6 didn't hurt his teammates by accident.
been attacking, and Doncic has got 2, but he is on the floor for LA.
Look at the middle.
6. Stephon Marbury.
He will. Marbury, the floater, gets the roll.
Well, that trailer.
Most players who can't get along with teammates eventually get traded. Stephon Marbury found a way to go to war with 3 different coaches on the same team, threatened to blackmail one of them on a team plane in front of witnesses,
On the way up, it's hit. He's going to shoot a jumper this time, and that time it was short.
and somehow not leave for years. He came to New York in 2004 as a 2-time All-Star, a 4th overall pick, and the headliner of a deal that was supposed to give the Knicks a franchise cornerstone at the point. And for about 10 minutes, it looked like it might work.
Floater that was. Stolen that time. Sabalos reached in, and now Marbury.
Then came Larry Brown. Feuds, public spats, a brutal season, a bitter departure.
Nice and take advantage. Just incredible hops.
Then Isaiah Thomas stepped in as coach. In November 2007, early in a new season, everything finally imploded. Marbury learned mid-flight, from a teammate, not from Thomas, that he'd been dropped from the starting lineup after just 5 games.
Got fouled, laid it up and in. Extraordinary.
What happened next? Sources on that plane say Marbury turned directly to Thomas and told him he had information that could destroy the coach. Information he'd release publicly if Thomas didn't back down. That's not friction between 2 people who disagree. That's a player threatening his own coach with blackmail in front of a plane full of teammates.
So good by Marbury. Look at the Mavs coming up on taking care of himself in so many ways.
He went from being benched to being banned from Knicks games and practices entirely. His response? He showed up anyway. When the team was on the road, new coach Mike D'Antoni offered him minutes off the bench. He refused to play, leaving teammates shorthanded and grinding through injuries without him.
Mike may be injured. Harris the layup. And the Bucks are finally on the board.
Teammate Quentin Richardson put it plainly. I don't look at him as a teammate anyway. The Knicks bought him out in February 2009. The word teammate is supposed to mean something. It's supposed to mean you show up. It's supposed to mean you put the uniform on even when it's uncomfortable.
On the way up, it's hit. He's going to shoot a jumper this time, and that time it was short.
Marbury made it clear that the title only applied when it worked for him. And when his teammates needed him most, he made sure they couldn't count on him. What Marbury did with words, the man at number 5 handled with something the league had never seen inside a locker room before.
Next.
Nowitzki, nifty move, but missed the shot.
5. Gilbert Arenas.
That got cracked as he didn't realize he was behind the glass.
Most locker room disputes end in harsh words, a shove, Maybe a shouting match that everyone pretends didn't happen the next morning. Gilbert Arenas ended his with 4 guns laid out on a bench like a room service menu. December 2009.
Gilbert Arenas rattles it home. It is a three-pointer.
The Washington Wizards had been a genuine surprise across the previous 3 seasons. 3 consecutive playoff appearances anchored by Arenas, a 3-time All-Star who had carried that franchise on his back when nobody believed in them.
See the double team, man, that frees up people.
Arenas puts it in.
That era was already unraveling when Arenas and teammate Javaris Crittenton got into a heated argument over a card game on the team plane home from Phoenix. The trash talk got personal. Crittenton made a threat, and Arenas, by his own admission, decided he was going to call that bluff.
As the Lakers pulled away in the second overtime, so it's a 6-0 run for the Lakers.
He showed up to the next practice and laid out 4 unloaded guns in front of Crittenton's locker. "Pick one," he said. "Here's what that move cost." Crittenton reached into his bag and drew his own weapon, a loaded one. Teammates scattered.
3:32 left in the half. It is the biggest lead of the game now for the Washington Wizards.
Caron Butler, who witnessed the entire confrontation and detailed it later in his memoir, described it like a standoff out of the Old West. 2 men in a professional basketball locker room with guns drawn while everyone around them ran for cover. Commissioner David Stern suspended both players for the rest of the 2009-10 season.
And Radmanovich has knocked down 2 in a row.
Lottie, 4 of 7 for the field.
Arenas never played another game in Washington. Crittenton never played another game in the NBA. And in 2011, he pled guilty to voluntary manslaughter following a shooting in Atlanta. He's currently serving time. What started as trash talk over a card game on a team charter ended with 2 careers gone and lives permanently altered.
That got cracked as he didn't realize he was behind the glass.
The locker room is supposed to be the one place in your professional world where the people next to you have your back. The moment you walk in with a weapon, you make it impossible to ever be that for anyone again. That's what contempt looks like when it becomes physical. And the man at number 4 expressed his across almost every franchise in the league.
Years at Golden State, he was on his own. He was a free crossover.
4, Dwight Howard.
Inside, counted and a foul. There's Thomas inside, block.
Here's the part that doesn't make the highlights. Dwight Howard won the Defensive Player of the Year award 3 consecutive times, 2009, 2010, and 2011. He made 8 All-Star teams. He was drafted first overall in 2004 and became the centerpiece of an Orlando Magic roster that reached the NBA Finals.
This year he's been called for 10-second violations. Nelson gave up his body.
By the end of his career, he had suited up for 7 different NBA franchises, and at nearly every stop the pattern repeated. April 2012. Stan Van Gundy stepped to a podium before a game against the Knicks and confirmed what the organization had already told him. Dwight Howard had asked the Magic to have him fired.
The foot. And then when you do go to get him, he runs the spin move, even going.
Van Gundy was mid-sentence when Howard appeared, draped his arm around the coach's shoulder in front of the cameras, and denied everything to his coach's face. While Van Gundy stood there and processed what was happening in real time, Van Gundy was fired the following month.
Right now he's banging on a top. Thomas, clear out, look.
Howard was traded to the Lakers that summer. Here's where the story gets genuinely complicated. Reports from Howard's time in Los Angeles surfaced that he had given the Lakers specific conditions for re-signing: fire head coach Mike D'Antoni and, in the exact phrasing of the report, muzzle Kobe Bryant.
By Howard.
Now, that's quite.
Kobe Bryant, 5 rings, the most demanding competitive standard the modern era of this game had produced. Being asked to make less noise, Bryant told USA Today in 2015, when he saw the reality of what winning required, it made him uncomfortable, and I don't think he was willing to deal with that.
In a playoff game by one man, Dwight Howard. Back inside to Howard.
Howard signed with Houston, left for Atlanta, left for Charlotte. Former Charlotte teammates were described in a report as just sick and tired of his act. He finally got his championship ring with the Lakers in the 2020 NBA bubble. By then, a decade's worth of bridges had burned behind him.
This work in the backcourt for the Magic with Jason Richardson, Ryan Anderson.
Talent can take you a long way in this league, but you can't pretend what you're really like when the cameras are off. Every organization Howard landed in eventually found out. Coming up, a player who didn't hide what he thought of his teammates. He walked into a gym and made sure the entire building heard every word of it.
With ease. Now you can see it all today. The left-handed hook, the right-handed...
3. Jimmy Butler.
50% three-point shooting against Miami. Here's a long shot.
October 10th, 2018. The Minnesota Timberwolves hadn't practiced with Jimmy Butler in 3 weeks. He'd requested a trade in September. The regular season was 6 days away. Tom Thibodeau needed to know what his team had. What he found out that morning changed the franchise.
Good defender is Holiday, thinking his five. Gets it up and in.
Butler had been a 4-time All-Star by that point, the undisputed engine of a Timberwolves squad that had ended a 13-year playoff drought the previous season. Karl Anthony Towns was 22 years old. Andrew Wiggins was 23. This nucleus was supposed to grow into something real.
This is unbelievable. Butler will maneuver. That by out of the Kumbo's defense.
Butler had a specific read on those two men, and on October 10th, he decided everyone in the building was going to know exactly what that read was. He grabbed the third stringers, the end of the bench guys fighting for roster spots, and proceeded to dismantle the starting unit. He blocked shots.
Who's the number 1 three-point shooter so far in these playoffs? Butler around angles.
He made steals. He passed. He barely shot the ball once. And the entire time, he was calling his teammates out, specifically Towns and Wiggins, in ways that left the gym speechless. GM Scott Layden stood on the sideline and watched. Butler turned to him mid-scrimmage.
By Butler. He did in there win. Highsmith on the perimeter.
You need me. You cannot win without me. ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski reported that Butler left the building having left teammates and coaches largely speechless. That night, Rachel Nichols sat down with him. She asked if the reports were true. He said, "A lot of it is true." And then he smiled.
As he was thrashing away, 7 to play in the third.
He was traded to Philadelphia weeks after that. Here's the part of the story nobody saw coming when that practice made headlines. Karl Anthony Towns won the 2025 NBA championship with the New York Knicks. Andrew Wiggins won a ring with the Golden State Warriors in 2022.
The first two, a second block right there for Lopez. Picked up Butler, 3, good!
The two players Jimmy Butler publicly humiliated in that practice now have championship rings. The man who called them soft is still chasing his first. You can burn down a locker room on your way out the door. The NBA lets you. But the guys you dismissed have long memories too.
Put it in. In stride is Butler, puts on the brakes at a 14.
And sometimes the only thing left to say gets said with a ring. The man at number 2 burned down 2 different locker rooms in 2 different cities, with 2 different sets of teammates who each believed in him. And he left both with the same silence.
First and laces one through right there. And Holiday is right there.
2. Kyrie Irving. In October 2018, Kyrie Irving stood in front of the TD Garden crowd and made a promise. "If you'll have me back," he said, "I plan on being here." The building went up. 14 months later, the locker room he'd left behind was finally breathing again.
Here. Say, no, I'm going to give an ooh and an ah to the crowd. Goes up under.
Not because of how Kyrie had played, because of what the atmosphere felt like the moment he wasn't there. Here's what the record actually shows. In 2017-18, with Kyrie injured and unable to play a single game, and with Gordon Hayward lost on opening night, the Boston Celtics went 55-27 and reached Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals.
Kyrie down to the hoop. He gets around Finney-Smith, has a layup right.
A young roster, Tatum, Brown, Rozier, carrying that franchise to within 1 win of the finals without either of their 2 biggest stars. In 2018-19, with Kyrie healthy and present for 67 games, the Celtics finished 49-33 and were eliminated in the first round by Milwaukee in 5 games. 6 fewer wins, 3 rounds earlier, more talent on the floor.
Give him the right hand, and he saunters down the lane for a scoop.
If you were watching closely, you already knew how this was going to end. Inside that building, ESPN documented that Kyrie repeatedly directed public criticism at the team's younger players, Tatum, Brown, Rozier, through the media, in ways that made establishing any kind of leadership structurally impossible. Jaylen Brown called the atmosphere that season toxic.
And I think what happens is everybody's watching those things. So I got to be able to coach you and tell you.
Sources close to the team said Kyrie had already decided he was heading to Brooklyn before the All-Star break in March. Players reported not knowing where they stood with him from one day to the next. The day Kemba Walker arrived the following summer to replace him, people with direct knowledge of that locker room described the shift as night and day.
Clock is down to 3. Kyrie Irving doing it in on the defensive line. Boston out to get.
Same players, same building, same coaching staff. The only variable that changed was the name at point guard. Leadership doesn't show up in October promises to a sold-out arena. It shows up in January, when you're losing, when the road trips get long, and your teammates need you to be exactly the person you told them you were.
Here. Say, no, I'm going to give an ooh and an ah to the crowd. Goes up under.
Kyrie Irving had 2 full rosters counting on him to be that person. He left both with the same question unanswered. Number 1 on this list answered that question every morning at practice, sometimes with his fists. And he has 6 rings to complicate absolutely everything.
Ability to handle the basketball, so skilled, beautiful move in transition, avoiding.
1. Michael Jordan.
Game in and game out, but against the Bulls, he does.
The greatest player in the history of this sport punched Steve Kerr in the face during a Chicago Bulls practice, hit him hard enough that Phil Jackson threw him out of the gym. He called Kerr that night and apologized.
Michael Jordan hit the basket at the buzzer.
And then that same team went out and went 72-10, the greatest regular season record in NBA history at that point, and won the championship. That tells you everything and nothing simultaneously. Jordan's career scoring average of 30.1 points per game is the highest in NBA history.
Dumars was thinking that he had rotation help. Woo! Wow.
The Bulls won 6 championships in 8 years, back-to-back-to-back, a hiatus, then back-to-back-to-back again, and the man at the center of it was, by the documented accounts of the people who played alongside him, a presence so demanding and at times so demeaning that the full picture has never fit cleanly inside any narrative about greatness.
Michael Jordan. This is a great move by Michael Jordan.
Will Perdue played alongside Jordan from 1988 to 1995, 3 championship rings, 2 three-peats, and decades later, Perdue said it plainly, he was a jerk. He crossed the line numerous times. Perdue confirmed he took a punch from Jordan in practice himself. That wasn't the only fight. That was one of numerous. Sam Smith documented the pattern in his 1992 book, The Jordan Rules, the psychological warfare, the public dressing downs, the way Jordan applied a standard to teammates who didn't always have the capacity to absorb it. Jordan didn't deny any of it in The Last Dance. He leaned into it. Here's the part that separates this from every other entry on this entire list. Steve Kerr stood his ground, Jordan hit him, Kerr hit back, Jackson cleared the gym, Jordan called that night and apologized. And Kerr, who had a black eye and every reason to hold it against him, said later, "It was the best thing I ever did, standing up to him."
12-6 Boston.
He tested everybody he played with. I stood up to him. He earned my respect. The men who came out the other side of playing alongside Jordan, Kerr, Pippen, Rodman, Perdue, don't all have the same verdict. Perdue said he crossed the line. Kerr said the relationship became better for it. Pippen's story is complicated in ways that deserve their own conversation entirely. What they all share, they played alongside the most demanding presence in the history of this sport. He crossed lines. He held them to standards they didn't always agree with, in ways nobody would fully defend, and he dragged every single one of them to a ring.
And the Chicago Bulls will move on to play the New York Knicks in the best of 7.
This league has seen 100 players who treated teammates badly and won nothing. Michael Jordan is the only case where the behavior is indefensible and the results are equally undeniable. That doesn't make it right. It makes the conversation impossible to resolve cleanly. 6 rings deep, and we're still not sure what to do with the answer.
Jordan with 2 seconds to go puts it up and scores at the buzzer. Michael Jordan.